So these are three broad types of learning goals. Those of you familiar with the Understanding by Design framework know that we ask teachers and curriculum teams to think about each when they're planning curriculum. And the clarity and the distinction among these impacts both how we teach, how students learn, and also how we assess. Look, if I want to see if students know things, I can give objective tests and quizzes with single right answers. Because if you think about it, knowing something, at least factual knowledge, is binary. You know it or you don't. But if I want to see if a student can demonstrate understanding, which I call deep learning, and can transfer that learning, then we need new situations, i.e. a performance task or project, to give us evidence that students can, in fact, flexibly apply their learning. How many of you are familiar with the name John Hatti, H-A-T-T-I-E? Some of you know John. He's a researcher from New Zealand, spent his entire academic career, more than 30 years, 35 years, in fact, studying, teaching, and learning, and has written a series of books with the title Visible Learning, in which John describes what he calls the effect sizes of different teaching techniques. What impact on learning and achievement does cooperative learning or project-based learning or formative assessments have? Well, I've gotten to know John in recent years, and he sent me an article that I think relates to this webinar. John said, in all my years studying teaching and learning, I've concluded that we can think of three levels of learning. John says there's surface level learning, which he describes as learning where students are presented with new information by a teacher, or maybe they read it in a book or they view it online. But he reminds us that if students take in new information, but they don't do anything with it, it's not necessarily going to last. It can remain superficial and eventually will fade from memory. Then John says there's deep learning, which he defines as I do, as learning with and for understanding. But notice the graphic, deep learning is below the surface. And in my view, it takes time for students to really develop understanding of abstract concepts and processes. So deep learning takes time for the students, and we have to have time for them to what I call make meaning. And finally, John agrees with Grant Wiggins and I that the deepest learning is evident when students can transfer, when they can apply that learning to new things in a flexible and an effective way. So this is one of the leading researchers in our profession, underscoring ideas that are at the heart of this webinar.